everyone. You are listening to the Rachael Maves Podcast, and I'm Rachael Maves, your host. Today, we are talking with Ivan Duran. Dr. Ivan Duran is the superintendent of Highline Public Schools, where he is committed to fulfilling the Highline promise to know every student by name, strength, and need so they graduate prepared for the future they choose. A proud product of public education, Ivan brings over 30 years of experience as a teacher, principal, and district leader in Washington, Texas, and Colorado. He is driven by a deep commitment to educational equity, continuous improvement, and collaborative leadership. Dr. Duran, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so I'm excited about this conversation because you and I are just kind of getting to know each other. Tell me a little bit about your pathway in education and why you chose this crazy career.
It's been a crazy career, but it's been a career that I just have loved. I think I probably have to go back to my parents' experience in schools. I don't think it's an accident that I became an educator because my parents just didn't have the best experience in schools. The first stories I remember my mom telling me about her experience has been she moved from New Mexico to Denver and was a native Spanish speaker and basically entered a school system that wasn't ready to have kids that spoke different languages. And so she always struggled, she always struggled in school. So that was her stories about school, was just the challenges that she faced. And then my dad was a high school dropout, and so he actually never finished school. And for me, my own experience at school was, most of it was relatively good. I did have some real issues that came up for me, especially in my adolescence years. And I just struggled in high school and was working full time, had a car, had money. You have a car, you have money, you have friends. And I just didn't apply myself in school. I really struggled and actually got to the point where I almost dropped out of school in 11th grade. But grateful that my mom just really created this clear boundary for me and basically said, you have two choices. We've raised you the best way that we can, and you can either graduate from school and stay with us, or if you think you've got everything figured out, you can move out now. So, being 17-year-old, I thought I was pretty smart then, but I thought I'm not ready to live on my own, So, I ended up graduating from school, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I got involved with this church and started, doing like some youth counseling and just through that experience, I was working with high school kids that were just, 1-2 years younger than me. And I just started seeing the power of having somebody connect with youth and just support them and guide them and not judge them, because everybody just is making the best, of their situation in the world. And it was through that time I realized the power of an individual making a difference on the life of a student. And so I sold everything I accumulated in 3 years, applied to go to college and, started school when I was 21. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher at that point. So yeah, it was 100%. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I'm really grateful I didn't go to school right away, because I don't think I'd be here today if I would have went to college right away. So
what a powerful story, Ivan. I now that seeing where your career trajectory has gone, you're a superintendent of a pretty large district. Like, what's your mom's lens? I'm curious to.
Oh, my mom's just so proud. She's just so happy and just so proud. And, when I was going through school and just doing my struggles and stuff, she was going through her own struggles and didn't know how to help me. So she really relied on just the school system to take care of me, but it didn't provide what I needed at the time. Here in Highline, we have something, we talk about our promise to know students by name, strength, and need. And I often have told people here that my friends knew me by name, strength, and need, but not necessarily my teachers, So my mom today is just really proud of where I'm at, and she knows I'm making a difference in the world. And I think that's probably the greatest gift that, an individual can do. So my mom, super proud.
Yeah, I love that. Aw. So your career has been pretty varied with Washington, Texas, Colorado. Tell me a little bit about that, like the different states, what those positions were, that trajectory that kind of took you across the country in different places.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Denver, and so, started off teaching in Denver and, and what I always tell people, that are looking for either, especially now, people that are looking to be superintendents, they also do a lot of mentoring and support of people that are thinking that way. And I just always tell people, just have to do good work with whatever you're doing. You just have to be, understand what your job is, understand what your role is, and good things come from that, So that's kind of been my way of thinking about my work. I was a teacher, and then I had the opportunity to do some coaching. And at that time, Denver Public Schools was bringing in new technology. We were way ahead of the curve with the internet and all those type of things, and training teachers. And so I had the opportunity to get involved with that kind of work, and then just move my way up, and the opportunities would come up for me, and, assistant principal. And, of all the roles I've had, I would say that being a principal is probably my favorite one.
Really?
Yeah, it's still my favorite job. It's that balance, because you have the, so it's so funny now to be a system leader, like, wow, some of the stuff not being done is like, well, because principals have a lot of authority in their role, they have a lot of autonomy too. And so I think I just loved that position the most, because it still gave me that proximity to teaching and being close with students that I really loved. But I would just say that I just always have had the opportunity to look at what's next and see how I can make systems better. And then opportunities have just come to me. So I've been really fortunate that way. But I've been, Denver Public Schools is just about 90,000. I worked in Aurora, which is probably just about 40,000 now. And then down in Dallas, a district of 160,000. I mean, it just has given me a really good perspective on, school system sizes. And I knew that when I worked in Aurora, Colorado, it was probably the district that I enjoyed the most because of the size, and so I knew when I wanted to be superintendent, I didn't want to be a large, school system. I wanted to be in a little smaller setting, because I just feel you just get better connections, people in a different way. And, Highline's a district of about 17,500. And for me, it's been a great fit, really great fit.
I love what you talk about with the Highline promise, that to know every student by name, strength, and need. How is that lived out in your district, on your campus?
Oh, it's great. It's living out in really great ways. And we just had a conversation yesterday with our cabinet team and our team that are leading out work around MTSS. So, multi-tier systems of support. It's not a new concept in education, not anything, new in any way, but having really refined systems, all the way from really good data systems to keep track of progress monitoring, really good assessments, and then ensuring that our professional learning communities in our schools are having the right kind of conversations. So that is really where we're seeing this promise come true the most, because you're really understanding the needs of students, both from a mental health, academic, behavioral perspective, having the right group of educators together to have those type of conversations, and then walking out with a plan on what they're going to be doing to support students. So we're really seeing that being played out. And, it's part of our strategic plan goals, and just one of our big priorities that we've been working on for the last year and a half. And we're going to stay working on that, And the flip to it is the promise also talks about for the future they choose. And so we've been doing some really exciting work around secondary school redesign and thinking about how can we create more engaging learning environments for students and for teachers. How can we create opportunities for, students just to be exposed to more relevant and rigorous content. And so our comprehensive high schools have been going through a process. And just recently, one of them, Tyee High School, just announced a medical pathway that they're going to have within their school. And it's in partnership with one of our local hospital systems. And so students are going to be exposed to job shadowing, career exposures, opportunities to get into the nursing field, all the way to being understanding the process to become a doctor or surgeon. So those type of experiences are how we're making that promise come true for our students as we think about the future that they choose, because the world's changing quickly.
Yes.
But we know that students, the more education that a student has underneath them when they leave high school, the more likely they're going to have, a future that's filled with more financial stability and just safety and support that, they talk a lot that they want for their community and for their families. So it's coming out in some really big ways within our system work.
Yeah. I love being able to talk with leaders that really have that systems mindset, because I always laugh that because it's the non-sexy work, right? It's not super shiny. It's just the disciplined piece of having those structures in place where on a regular basis, you're looking at the data and making data-informed decision-making. So simple, but it's something that we don't give a lot of credit to for making sure that we can drive change for student outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all systems work, it's all about people and, how you help people understand the vision and what you're trying to achieve. And, I always think about, Richard Elmore's work, and Pargo always talks about that, that if you raise the level of expectations, and you have to make sure you raise the level of support, so I think that's something that has always been on my mind as a systems leader, and make sure that we're just really making sure we're trying to do is I think our educators are doing the best they can on a day-to-day basis. And, our leaders are doing the best they can. But if we want things and outcomes for our students to change, then we have to think differently around the behavior and our own behavior and what we're doing to support them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue into that next question. As you think about the promise that you're making in Highline to your students and to staff in the district, and this ever-evolving and rapidly changing context that we have in education, what keeps you up at night as the leader of your system?
There's a lot of things. But we had a cyber incident earlier at the very start of the school year, and so that's kept me up many times over this school year, and I wish it upon no one, but unfortunately there's just a number of bad actors that are playing havoc in our not only education systems, but I think across the world, but I think the one that is really, there's a couple, but I think one that's really been on my mind a lot is this. I probably would frame it in what I kind of see as like the biggest challenge that we face, and part of that is just navigating this tension between we want to increase the student outcomes for our students, but we also have to address just the growing and complex needs of our students and our families, from mental health supports, behavior supports, equity. Issues of safety that are being played out right now, especially with some of our immigrant families, those are really big. We also have, unfortunately, have had some gun violence in our community. We have lost 6 students this year to gun violence. And our community safety person says it best. It's like, would we be okay with it if it's 4, if it's 3? And the answer is no. We got to get to this point where it's 0. But there's this larger societal issue around access to guns in our society that is just playing out in really big ways. And so this tension around trying to help our students, read and write and to be big thinkers, and then the complex needs that our students or families having, all being done within limited financial supports. Here in Washington, our legislators just finished up their session, and we did get some additional funding, but nowhere near what they should be funding us for. And so that keeps me up at night, because we keep, although we've limited, our priorities and the work that we're trying to do, we have 4 clear priorities here in Highline, and we're going to continue those 4 priorities, but we're still asking our educators to do a lot.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen that really play out this year, because our youngest son is attending one of our schools. He's just in kindergarten. He is attending one of our dual language schools, and he's acquiring both Spanish and English and just doing amazing. But being in the classroom more and watching his teacher and what she has to deal with, they sent us home. They sent this earlier. It was like this writing kind of project that the kids did, but it really was this fascinating insight into the wide range that is in the kindergarten classroom. You have kids that are writing above grade level. You have kids that are still forming letters. And so we're asking our educators to do a lot, and we're asking them to do a lot with limited resources, And so I don't know what the answer is yet, but it's one of the questions and follow-ups that I'm going to be having, both with the principal of the school and the teacher, just around, what would you want? What would you need to help you so that we ensure that every student, gets to as close to grade level as possible? But the reality is that when you have students that are coming in that have never been in preschool or haven't had exposure to school, we're asking our educators to do a lot.
Yes.
And there's just not enough time. There's not enough resources. And so it's definitely keeping me up at night because, as you know, we still get judged by that yearly state assessment that comes out. And, 40% of our kids are second language learners, and so how do we identify how we measure success? We have to be thinking differently around what that looks like and how we measure growth for our students and give credit, both to our students, our educators, and our schools for the great work that they do. Still, we're thinking about all those other complex needs and challenges that come into play. So it's complex.
It is, Ivan, and I appreciate you putting your finger on that because I do feel like, for people who are non-educators listening to this differentiating your instruction or being able to meet the needs of students where they're at in a single classroom when there's this wide gap, it is extremely challenging. And for the students that are exceeding, and I know that you already know all this, but for the students that are exceeding, keeping them engaged so that they're not bored and also that they're not feeling like they're just being used to teach. And then also meeting the needs of the students at the bottom. And what I've seen, and I'd be curious if you've seen this play out too, is that post-pandemic, those gaps just widened significantly. And so we took something that was already hard and challenging to try to figure out, and then the gaps became exacerbated. And then the level of complexity and the challenge now that we're trying to face, I feel like is even bigger. And I'd be curious if that's been your experience of what you're seeing also in the classrooms.
Yeah, 100%. I think what we're really seeing, especially like at the middle school grades, where, kids that were, in the younger grades and really missed out on some of the foundational skills that are required, and again, during the pandemic, everyone was doing the best that they could, but, there's still a real gap. But we assessed our middle school students last year. We were using, iReady to do some measures. And at that point, we found that almost half of our 8th grade students were reading below grade level, and so that put this huge wow, that just, what are we going to do? So one of our other priorities is literacy. And we've had this system-wide focus on literacy. And we're doing some really great work at the secondary level because, up until this year, most of literacy instruction falls upon our language arts teachers. And when you have that many students who are reading below grade level, you cannot intervene your way out of it. So you have to focus on high quality instruction.
That's right.
Understanding where students are. But what we have been finding is that most of our, middle school, high school teachers, they don't know how to teach kids how to read. That's not their expertise. Their expertise is in the content area. And so we have been doing some great professional learning with our school leaders, with our teachers, and really thinking about every one of our teachers being a literacy teacher.
Yes.
And I walked into one of our science classrooms here this year, and it's the first time I have ever seen a science teacher doing lessons around literacy and annotating text, and that just gave me a lot of hope for how we're going to get ourselves out of this, because our teachers, they know our students are struggling and they want to know how to help them. And so we're, again, raising the expectations and providing the right supports to them. And so check in with me in about a year's time, but give you a better answer. We are seeing, we're just getting our data together for kind of analyzing the end of year results. But we are definitely seeing some bright spots, where we have seen some schools, put together really good systems to understand where students are, and then strong professional learning communities, and then the strong instructional practices. That's what's going to get us out of this. It's not going to be a curriculum, it's not going to be this third-party product that's going to help us. It comes down to high-quality Tier 1 instruction. That's what we need to do better.
Yeah. I mean, you're touching on, and this is a great example of one way to move forward, that focus on literacy, what it means to be and embrace and own literacy at all levels of the organization, and then providing that support. But what are other ways that you're thinking about moving forward and addressing some of those things that really keep you up at night?
I think the other one for me has been thinking about the role of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of stuff out there right now. And, we have really been approaching it from this human-centered approach and really trying to ensure that, I do not see artificial intelligence replacing our teachers in any way.
I agree.
It does keep me up a little bit because I think with, technology throughout education, over the last 20 years, there's always been a gap. There's always been an equity gap around who has access to the latest and greatest, who has access to the right types of, professional learning to ensure that it's being integrated in the best way possible. And that's one thing I'm really concerned about also, both for our students and our educators, and especially with our families. A lot of our families are, like I said earlier, are families that come from incredibly diverse backgrounds. We have families that are newly arrived immigrants, just getting settled into the United States. And so, there's a lot of opportunity for people to be left behind during this movement. And yet, I think there's so much promise in terms of how artificial intelligence can help us do our work better and smarter. Here in Highline, our digital transformation chief, Deshaun Christie, he's been really working with us as cabinet to make sure that we understand the tools and we understand how to use them. And as we start moving forward into next year, the things that we've been talking around is that we have to ensure that every one of our specialists knows how to utilize these tools, has already come up with ways to, make their work more productive.
That's right.
And are thinking about how they can support classroom teachers with this work. So we got a lot of system work again to do to make sure that all adults in our system know how to use that. But I just want to make sure that we're not leaving students, families, and educators behind as we move forward with artificial intelligence. There's a lot of promise, but it's not the magic bullet. It's not the silver bullet.
Yeah, we're so aligned with that, Ivan, because Parsec's an education technology company, and we've been having lots of conversations around what is the place of AI and what does that mean and look like. And for me, having been a former teacher and principal in SUP, I really believe that space is exactly what you're putting your finger on, of how can we take the things that are a huge administrative lift on our staff that take actually away from their time with students, away from their time in teaching, and identify those places that AI can make them more productive with those things. And that's where I think it's just going to be key and really take off in a different way.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think you're really spot on with that. That's way back when I was instructional technology director, in the district. And that's how we approached the work. We looked at what we were trying to do with instruction, and our coaches would actually go in the classrooms and they would observe a teacher for a whole day. And then they would have these coaching conversations around how they thought a piece of technology could support them in a better way. And I think we have to do the same thing with artificial intelligence to think around how do we incorporate it into our work? How can it help teachers save time? Whether it's, email responses, creating lesson plans. There's so many different ways it can be utilized, but it's going to all come down to professional learning. Way back when I was way back in Denver, when we started some of this visioning around how we were going to be integrating technology, our rule of thumb back then was 10% of whatever we're spending needs to be spent on professional learning. So we were spending $100,000, $10,000 of that dollars needed to be spent on how we were going to be training adults on how to use that equipment in the best way possible. And I think we're in that same place right now.
Yeah. So this is our last question for our time together. And my favorite question, what question in education are we not asking that we really should be?
That's a great question. I think what's coming up for me is, again, going back to just how are we ensuring that we are preparing students for this future that I think is evolving and changing faster than what we're ever going to see, from my own experience, So I think we have to be asking the question around how we are helping students really understand what does future success look like. So going back to our promise, and helping our students really think about the future that they choose, and then really ensuring that we are creating these systems and structures to support students for that future work. Because, I think about even my dad's experience, where high school dropout, he ended up becoming a truck driver, and, Fortunately, he became a union truck driver. So, he ended up basically taking us to like middle class, from the work that he did. But that doesn't happen anymore. It's really rare for someone to be able to either not be a, high school graduate or to be a high school graduate and to walk out and to be able to make, a living wage that's really going to help them have some financial freedom. So we have to be asking this question around how are we ensuring that we are really preparing students for this future that is evolving and changing so quickly. And we have to have more opportunities for students to be able to earn those workplace credentials, associate's degrees. The more that our students can walk out, both with their high school diploma and additional education, the more likely we're going to be setting them up for future success. So that's the question I think it has to be one of our burning questions, because our systems have to change in order to support our students for the future.
Oh, yeah, we couldn't agree more. Well said. Well, thank you, Iber, for your time today. I really appreciated this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I really love the opportunity and hope you get some time to have a great summer.
Yeah, and I will be following back up in a year. I want to hear the success story.
I look forward to sharing that.
Yeah,
Forward to sharing that
awesome.
with you. All right, thank you.
A friendly reminder, everyone, that Parsec Education's updated early bird sale is live until October 31st. Get 25% off tickets for the 2026 Measure What We Value Summit happening February 4th through 5th in Fresno, California. Don't miss this limited time offer and the opportunity to experience our incredible MC, Brandon Leak, Season 15 winner of America's Got Talent. Secure your tickets now at parsecsummit.com.